The soft hum of the airport never felt so suffocating. Elena Martinez stood poised, a figure of calm in a storm she didn't expect, where her voice would be weaponized against her. Her dignity tested by a single smirk, but no one expected what would happen next. Dear listeners, what you are about to witness is not just a story. It is a powerful testament to the quiet power and pursuit of justice in places most people ignore. Elena adjusted the emerald scarf around her neck, the silky fabric catching the morning light like a quiet promise. Her tailored charcoal blazer fit her perfectly, every inch the accomplished CEO she was. Years of experience had taught her to expect anything in airports, but not this. An arrogant gate agent who seemed determined to chip away at her confidence. Gavin Reed, senior supervisor of the airline, looked up as she approached the counter. His uniform was immaculate, but the coldness in his eyes was unmistakable. A smirk tugged at the corner of his lips as if he already had the upper hand. "Good morning," Elena said, her voice steady and calm. "I'm here to confirm my boarding details for Flight 727. He glanced at the screen, then back to her, his tone slipping into mockery. "Elena Martinez? How do you say that again? Martinez? Martinez." His tone wasn't just teasing. It was a deliberate attempt to unsettle, to mark her as other, in front of the waiting crowd. Elena noticed the subtle shifts in the room, the brief glances, the slight stiffening of a few bodies, the murmurs that started to rise like a tide. She met Gavin's gaze without flinching. "Martinez," she replied evenly, pronounced as it's spelled. Gavin's smirk deepened. "Of course, but sometimes accents make things complicated. Maybe you'd find the back lounge more comfortable. Less pressure." Isabella's eyes narrowed slightly, but her voice remained measured. "I booked first class, Mr. Reynolds. Seat 2A. I expect to board accordingly." He glanced at his screen again, fingers tapping with exaggerated casualness. "Looks like there's been a change. You've been reassigned to 34C. His tone was light, but the weight behind it was unmistakable. A hush rippled through the crowd behind her. Isabella felt the gaze of strangers, some curious, some judgmental. The silence pressed against her like a physical force. 34C? She repeated, voice quiet but edged with steel. "That's economy, isn't it?" Mason shrugged with mock innocence. "System update. Happens all the time." Isabella inhaled slowly, steadying herself. Around her, the murmurs grew. Some passengers shifted uncomfortably. Others whispered to one another. A few cast quick glances, their faces betraying a mixture of pity and disdain. She lifted her chin, meeting Mason's gaze unflinchingly. "I'd like to speak with your supervisor." His smirk flickered, replaced briefly by a flash of irritation. "Let me call someone." He tapped his radio with exaggerated slowness. The minutes stretched out. Isabella could hear the distant hum of the terminal but felt isolated, spotlighted by silent judgment. When the supervisor arrived, a woman named Claire Whitman. Her expression was polite but guarded. Isabella explained the situation with calm precision, but Claire's assurances rang hollow. "We're doing our best to accommodate everyone," she said. "Sometimes these changes can't be avoided." Isabella's silence was louder than any protest. The unspoken message was clear. She was an inconvenience, a problem to be managed quietly and dismissed. Isabella's lips pressed into a thin, unyielding line. She could feel the weight of the room's silence pressing down on her, the invisible barrier erected between her and the dignity she deserved. Around her, passengers shuffled forward, eager to escape the discomfort of the moment, while a few exchanged furtive glances, some sympathetic, others indifferent. Her phone buzzed softly in her handbag, the discreet vibration a lifeline amid the quiet storm. She glanced down to see a message from Derek, her trusted executive assistant. "Ready when you are." Isabella's jaw tightened. This was never about a seat. It was about a calculated dismissal, a subtle erasure. If you're enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. It is free and won't cost anything, but it means the world to us. We are just a small channel trying to grow. And do not forget to comment where you're watching from. Thank you, and back to our video. The announcement called for final boarding. Mason returned with a rehearsed smile to assist another passenger. One who had an economy ticket but received warmth and attentiveness. The contrast was stark and deliberate. Isabella turned back to the screen, her fingers tracing the itinerary she had painstakingly arranged. Every detail was precise, every partnership vital. She was not just a passenger. She was a client with the power to shape entire industries. Her gaze lifted, locking with Mason's once more. There was no room for error or concession in her expression. Minutes later, she stepped aside, seated in the molded plastic chair near the gate, a queen forced to sit among commoners. But Isabella's mind was far from subdued. The humiliation she endured was a spark, one that would ignite a reckoning. With calm precision, she opened her phone and sent the first in a series of quiet but seismic messages. Instructions to freeze key vendor contracts with the airline, alerts to legal advisors, and communications to partners. This was her silence speaking volumes. The storm had only just begun. After dispatching the final encrypted message to her team, Isabella gathered her belongings with deliberate calm. The murmur of the terminal wrapped around her like a distant storm. Passengers hurried past, oblivious to the quiet upheaval unfolding beneath their feet. Sunlight spilled through the expansive glass, catching the edges of her emerald scarf as she stepped through the sliding doors and into the cool afternoon air. Far from the buzz of the terminal, in a high-rise office overlooking the city's skyline, Derek's phone chimed sharply. The message from Isabella was clear and unambiguous. Initiate protocol. Now. Without hesitation, Derek began mobilizing legal counsel, finance officers, and communication specialists, each receiving their orders with precision and urgency. Meanwhile, within the marble halls of the airline's headquarters, an emergency meeting was already convening. Executives and senior staff gathered around a polished table, faces taut with concern as the weight of Elena Martinez's quiet, yet devastating response began to settle over the company. The conference room was heavy with tension, bathed in the soft glow of late afternoon light filtering through the blinds. Airline executives gathered around the polished oak table, their faces a mixture of concern and fatigue. The ripple effects of Elena Martinez's actions had unsettled the company's carefully maintained balance. Dennis Carter broke the silence, tapping his fingers thoughtfully on the table. This isn't just a PR issue anymore. The freeze on contracts has thrown multiple departments into turmoil. Vendors are anxious, partners are demanding answers, and the financial impact is spreading. Claire Whitman's expression tightened. Mason Reynolds' conduct at the gate, though subtle, set everything in motion. We need swift action to contain the fallout. Disciplinary measures, full investigations, and a clear message that this behavior won't be tolerated. Mason shifted uncomfortably, attempting to explain. I was just following protocol. I didn't intend to cause harm. Intentions aside, the damage is done, Claire interrupted firmly. Rebuilding trust is our immediate priority. Isabella's reach and influence extend far beyond what we anticipated. Meanwhile, miles away in a quiet office downtown, Isabella sat surrounded by advisors and Derek, her assistant, as they orchestrated their response with precision. Screens flickered softly, displaying the unfolding corporate chaos. This isn't about revenge, Isabella said calmly. It's about shining a light on the systemic problems that allowed this to happen and forcing accountability. Derek looked up, urgency in his eyes. The vendor freeze has already sent shockwaves through the industry. Calls are flooding in. Everyone knows we're serious. Isabella nodded slowly. Good. It's time to let the pressure build. The cracks are showing. Back at the airport, Elena Ruiz paced the staff lounge, the weight of silence heavy on her conscience. The memory of Mason's dismissive tone haunted her. She was treated unfairly, one colleague whispered. Who wants to risk their job speaking up? Another replied. Elena's chest tightened. The culture of silence was suffocating, but a small spark of courage was beginning to grow. Lucas, the junior gate agent, stared at his computer screen, hands trembling. His guilt over staying silent was unbearable. In a quiet moment, he began drafting an anonymous report detailing the boarding irregularities and implicit biases he had witnessed. His voice, long muted by fear, was finally finding its strength. As the days passed, the airline's carefully crafted image began to crack under mounting scrutiny. Damage control statements were issued, but public awareness continued to swell. Within boardrooms and break rooms, denial gave way to uneasy acceptance. The protective veil of silence was lifting, exposing a system in urgent need of reform. At the center of it all stood Isabella Martinez, resolute and unyielding, the architect of a quiet upheaval that would not be ignored. The early morning sun spilled golden light across the city skyline, casting long shadows through the glass walls of Isabella Martinez's downtown office. Outside, the streets buzzed with life, unaware of the quiet revolution unfolding high above in a room steeped with purpose and determination. Isabella sat behind her desk, eyes scanning through pages of reports, legal documents, and strategy notes. The contracts canceled, the vendor partnerships frozen, the audits commissioned. These were only the first tremors of change. She knew real transformation required much more than corporate maneuvers. It demanded dismantling entrenched biases, confronting uncomfortable truths, and rebuilding systems from the ground up. Her phone buzzed softly on the desk. A message from Derek. All guests have arrived. Ready for the summit. The summit. A gathering unlike any other. Not a press event or photo opportunity, but a confidential meeting of trusted advisors, community advocates, corporate partners, and diversity leaders. The future was being forged here. At the secluded retreat center nestled in the hills outside the city, the atmosphere was charged with both tension and hope. The long, oak conference table was surrounded by faces worn from struggle yet lit by resolve. The room vibrated with voices sharing stories of exclusion, resilience, failure, and unyielding hope. Isabella sat quietly listening as each attendee brought their truth to the table. There was no room for platitudes or avoidance here. The rawness was necessary, a cleansing of illusions before rebuilding. When her moment came, Isabella's voice was steady, clear, and carried the weight of experience. We are not here to patch cracks, she said. We must rebuild foundations that rest on transparency, accountability, and above all, dignity. Power is not control, it is responsibility. Our task is difficult. There will be resistance and setbacks. But we must persist because the cost of silence and complicity is far greater. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. This is more than corporate policy. It is a moral imperative. We are creating systems that will outlast us, that will protect future generations from the indignities we have endured. The room responded not with applause but with a solemn nodding, a collective commitment sealed in conviction. Back at the airline's headquarters, the fallout was palpable. Elena Ruiz sat in the staff lounge, heart pounding as she drafted the report that could no longer be delayed. Her hands trembled, but her resolve hardened. She recounted details of bias, subtle slights, and the culture of silence that had long been a shield for injustice. Pressing send felt like stepping off a precipice, but it was a leap she knew was necessary. Elsewhere, Lucas gathered his courage to raise issues in team meetings, suggesting bias training, open discussions, and policy reviews. His quiet advocacy slowly began to change conversations within his small circle, planting seeds of awareness. Mason Reynolds, once confident and dismissive, now sat in sensitivity training sessions. Each lesson peeled back layers of denial and ignorance, forcing him to confront uncomfortable truths about his actions and attitudes. The company issued statements promising reform, but it was the slow, unrelenting pressure from Isabella and her network that drove tangible change. Policies were rewritten, new oversight bodies created, and leadership diversity became a priority. Beyond the corporate corridors, Isabella launched community initiatives, funding programs for underrepresented entrepreneurs, sponsoring leadership development, and establishing a coalition for equity in business practices. She spoke at conferences and gatherings, not as a victim but as a catalyst, inspiring others to turn indignity into influence. The journey was fraught. Pushback from entrenched interests tested her resolve. Moments of exhaustion and doubt shadowed her path. But Isabella remained anchored in a vision where dignity was not a privilege but a right. One evening, as the city's lights shimmered against the darkened sky, Isabella stood by her office window, reflecting on how far the journey had come. Justice, she knew, was not a singular event or moment of revenge. It was a process, a relentless pursuit fueled by courage, patience, and unwavering commitment. Her story was no longer just hers. It belonged to every person who dared to demand fairness in a world that often whispered silence. With a final breath, Isabella embraced the quiet strength within her. This was not the end. It was the new dawn. If you enjoyed our story, subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories and don't forget to like and share.